Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of Halftime Talk. I'm delighted to be joined by Gulmira Rzayeva, founder and managing director at Eurasia Analytics. Good afternoon, Gulmira.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Good afternoon. Hello, welcome. It's quite a day to have you on the show. It's hard to really avoid the most obvious thing in the world, which is in the Ukraine and its impact on all commodities. Looking at the particular of oil, where we saw prices jump earlier in this week above $135 a barrel. Oil and gas, oil at least coming out of Russia being quite disrupted, including oil that transits Russia from Central Asia, Kazakhstan. I'm wondering, from your perspective, in terms of this escalating crisis, what potential threat could it be to energy supplies coming out of Central Asia and including Azerbaijan?
Oil coming from Central Asia and Azerbaijan, I think it's especially from Azerbaijan, cannot be disrupted with this event, simply because there is a completely different standalone infrastructure that transports Azerbaijani oil, which is Azeri light, to the world international oil market. So there is no risk for this oil to be disrupted coming from Azerbaijan. Well, with Central Asia, yes, Central Asian grades, they are transported via Russia, different infrastructure pipelines, and this is exported to the world market as Russian oil. So there is a risk that Central Asian oil can be disrupted, but again, if we take in total the Russia's oil export and the risk of disruption of total oil export, then this really can cause a great risk for oil, not only oil prices but also supply demand dynamics. So the total Russian crude and condensate production averaged last year 10.5 million barrel a day. This is 14% of global production. But if we look at the export, so the export into 2021 was 4.27 million barrel a day, and 60% of total Russian crude export went to Europe, and the 35% to Asia. So as you see, the European market here could be more vulnerable than any other market, because there is no particular sanctions on Russian crude or on energy as such, but there is interesting things. It's self-sanctioning is already having impact on oil supplies. Some companies, as you may have seen it, they don't want to import Russian crude. So this kind of a self-sanctioning coming from a major trading houses, this actually impacts not only the prices but also some create some supply issues. So
we have seen obviously there is disruption even without sanctions. Traders and banks are unwilling to finance and pick up. Even Chinese independent refiners now are keeping a little bit of a hands off from Russian oil because they don't want the complications of the uncertainty around legality. But just coming back to the question of Central Asia, the Azerbaijani oil, as you say, is protected by an independent infrastructure through Turkey to Ceyhan. But we're still unsure where Turkey is going to fall in all of this crisis. At the moment, they've signaled their alignment with NATO and the West, but still a little bit uncertain. What's your own sense about the decisions that Turkey will be making vis-a-vis this escalating crisis? And are you concerned from an Azerbaijani perspective that they could align more with Russia than with the West?
Well, yes, you're right. It's the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, via which Azerbaijan's been exporting its oil since 2006. so to Ceyhan and the Turkish port of Ceyhan, and from Ceyhan to world market. I think if let's start with Azerbaijan. Well, Azerbaijan is a small country in South Caucasus that has been, in all these geopolitical scenes of, located. If you look at the map, located in between all those major powers. Russia on the north, Iran on the south. And then we have Turkey on the west and European Union. So Azerbaijan, I think, cannot afford of confrontation with either of those, major powers in the region, because our region has been extremely volatile for many years, even many centuries. We just came out from the war which started in 2020. Just 2 years ago, Azerbaijan managed to liberate its occupied 20% of occupied territories from Armenian occupation, and Russia here played, if not significant, then one of the major significant role in this conflict, because still we have the Russian peacekeepers in the region. So in that
you would say Russia played a defining role. Russia played quite a defining role in that conflict, and there would be some concern, and perhaps you could speak to it, that Russia's extraterritorial intentions to create this buffer zone, this kind of Ukraine-style buffer zone in other places. What is the possible threat that presents to energy supplies coming out of Azerbaijan and other areas?
Well, it's not buffer zone anymore in Azerbaijan, as I said, because during the 44 days of war in 2020, we are still in that Karabakh, which was liberated from Armenian occupation. There is at the moment a Russian peacekeeping forces that, according to the agreement, will still be there another 3 years, because according to the agreement, the Russian peacekeeper will stay there for in total 5 years, and then afterwards we will see whether this agreement will be extended or not. So Russia is still there, but this cannot anyhow affect gas and natural gas and crude flows from Azerbaijan to Turkey and onward, because as I said, we have these standalone pipelines for both gas and crude, and this infrastructure, very critical, and this strategic infrastructure that is very well protected, not only by the government of Azerbaijan, but also by the partners that are involved. And the operator of those projects are BP, British Petroleum, and some other international majors that are involved in the project. So all the governments, they are protecting. It's Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey are protecting the critical infrastructure quite well. It's been many years, and I don't see any risk of disruption for crude and natural gas coming from Azerbaijan.
Well, I'm sure that would certainly, I think that's certainly the hope, and one would say in some level, but I think just sort of moving the conversation forward in the sense of how significant a moment is this that we're witnessing with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and in terms of it being in the scale of a sort of OPEC embargo in 1973, 50 years ago. We saw a significant jolt to the world energy structure. How do you see this moment, and with it, the things you're articulating make perfect sense until they don't, right? This is a world in which there are very significant things you never thought would happen before, and suddenly they're happening. I'm wondering, how big a moment do you think this is, or is just another disruption in the Caucasus and Eastern? We've seen this before, Bosnia, Georgia, Azerbaijan. This is just another moment. We swallow it and move on, or is this something much more pronounced in your opinion?
Well, if you mean the disruption related to energy carriers, it's
I mean, does Russia's invasion of Ukraine and driving oil prices to $130 plus, and the potential embargo of Russian oil. I mean, we're talking monumental developments here. We haven't even seen the siege on Kiev yet, which outlook would be that it is going to be quite a substantial, vicious outcome, perhaps. I'm just wondering, how big a moment do you think this is, sitting from an Azerbaijan perspective, where you've lived for many decades with turbulence? From your perspective, is this just another moment, or is this a transition moment similar to what we saw in the mid-70s?
Well, of course, this is an extraordinary situation that we perhaps haven't faced since 1973, and such a high oil, nobody predicted such a high oil prices in just 2 years, especially in 2020, when we've seen how oil or crude was traded in negative prices. So, but I think countries like Azerbaijan and Central Asian countries, especially Azerbaijan, which exports some 36 million barrels a day of crude, they, at the moment, if speaking from a commercial side of the events, at the moment simply benefiting financially from high oil prices. But this turbulent times is not, of course, would not benefit anyone, especially Azerbaijan, because we are talking about the supply disruptions and extremely high prices, which even the suppliers of countries like Azerbaijan would not want to see, because this always would, as we've seen in the history, would bring, supply shock and economic disasters to many economies in the world, especially to those countries that are pretty much dependent on oil, including the European countries, the major Azerbaijani clients, and the US as well. It's a very turbulent times that these countries and all of us are living at the moment, and in extreme case in which, let's say, Russian crude, in the event of Russian crude exports are fully seized, and we are talking about some 4.2 million barrels a day, then we can see the prices. I mean, this is kind of a modeling, a projection to rise further towards $130 per barrel, and I think that can hold.
Do you think, given that we've seen the price soar last week and again this week in early trading, even without officially sanctioning energy exports from Russia, that hasn't happened yet, and yet we've seen the markets go. The US and Europe are now saying they are going to consider sanctioning US oil, Russian oil exports. Do you think that will make a difference to the market, or has the market, do you think, already priced that in? Or could we even see the highest oil price in history, 2008, $147 a barrel? Do you think we could break that record if indeed sanctions become official?
Well, as I said, first of all, I don't think that the sanctions will direct it to fully seize the Russian oil exports, oil supplies, which is 4.2 million barrels. It's a lot, and even in the event if this happens, like, this is just a scenario. So this is, from my point of view, highly unlikely to happen, at least at the moment now this year, because the world and the US and Europe not ready to substitute this big amount of oil. Then from my point of view, prices projected to rise up to $130 per barrel. But then I think a lot of tools will be used by the US and its allies, because they would want to avoid such scenarios. So Russia, in retaliation to current sanctions, may also, decide to restrict energy supplies, but to some extent, not fully seize it. In that case, I don't think that this can go up more than $130 per barrel.
Well, we already went above 130 on Brent early this week. On Monday, oil prices went above 130, $135 on Brent, and they spiked. They came back down again, but inevitably they're testing new highs all the time.
Yeah, but this is normal because it's just a kind of a market sentiment that market reacts. There's some immediate reaction of market, which is very short lasted, and then it comes back to its normal diapason. So I think that if we take overall the natural crude oil price, for the year, then this can be averaged between $125 and $30 for the year. But then countries like US and Europe, they will bring some additional amount of oil to the market, and that's most likely is going to be Iranian oil, 1 or 1.3 million barrel a day, and then depends on the deal.
Well, it even seems now the Russians are starting to, the Ukraine crisis is getting sucked into the Iran talks in Vienna, and even that looks, what a week ago at the end of last week looked quite, likely to happen. Now it seems to be less likely, and having immediate relief for the market. There's COP26 in Glasgow last November. There was a certain amount of momentum that the energy transition was in a very kind of advanced stage and was looking like a lot of momentum, and with Egypt hosting the COP27 in November. But now this event has happened. I wonder, from your perspective, is this a accelerating moment for the transition, or will this be a disrupted moment for the energy transition?
Well, definitely this would be a disrupted moment for the energy transition, because some companies, they first of all, they face a lot of uncertainties regarding the energy transition, to make changes to their strategies, simply because many companies, they or countries, they're trying to switch from, let's say, coal to gas, or natural gas, crude to gas, and this process has been already started, because many countries are, if not banning, then at least trying to temporarily phase out coal plants mainly in Europe, switching them to gas. And at the moment, we see, this high oil prices has a spillover effect on the whole energy industry, and on gas as well, because gas prices soared dramatically as well. And again, is the background of all these events that are going on related to Ukraine, and also to some extent energy transition as well, because the demand for gas is growing, although gas is not as considered not the clean energy sources, but the European Union is considering to include natural gas to the taxonomy. So this is actually, it's a topic for the debate for 2022 and 2023, because it's a very major issue to including natural gas to the taxonomy. It's very important for the companies to know whether their projects will be financed in the future or not. So
well, we just saw some big announcements by Germany in the last few days, again on the back of the Ukrainian crisis, where they finally sort of gave a big green light to the big LNG importing, the construction of LNG importing facilities in Germany that had previously been kind of put on the long finger. I wanted just to sort of wrap up with thoughts about the kind of macroeconomic outlook for inflation. I mean, this event has come, and we talked a little bit, coming in the middle of the COP20, the climate and the energy transition and disrupting that. We're also about to embark on a tightening of monetary policy. The Fed are set next week to raise interest rates for the first time in a number of years, and the beginning of a tightening cycle. I'm wondering, from your perspective, how do these events and this sort of escalated inflation that we're now facing, how does that impact this moment of tightening?
Well, definitely we're going to see very difficult years ahead of us, given all these high energy prices, and this will affect many economies in the world with, as you said, inflation. With so much uncertainty surrounding crude flows from Russia to Europe, and the possibility of disruption ahead, I think the country that will mostly affected by that is the US. The US has actually limited tools to keep prices in check, although it could provide support to the region, to the European markets in short order with additional crude supplies. But as we see, US so far don't do that, and given that we are on the wake of presidential elections in next year, then U.S. domestic interest
midterm elections this year, midterm elections.
In November, right? So U.S. domestic interest precipitate the need for oil supply at a moment when the Russian invasion of Ukraine is adding upward price pressure. So I think if US would do that, then we will see some ease on prices. But in general, I think US has several tools at its disposal to boost supply over the short and medium term, maybe providing some benefits at home and to European countries looking for alternative to Russian barrels. Otherwise, this is going to have a very adverse effect on, first of all, the US economy, and then obviously European economies and other major economies that are dependent on oil.
Well, we must leave it there, Gulmira. We could certainly talk. There's so many trends, so many threads to these topics, but ultimately we take a snapshot on the situation. And thank you, Gulmira Rzayeva, founder and managing director of Eurasia Analytics. May I also take the opportunity to wish you happy International Women's Day. You are an inspiration to many women, and best of luck with all of your future successes.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.